Welcome to Cultimatum, the podcast that delves deep into the culture of complexities of cults and human trafficking. I'm your host, Anonymous Andrew. Each week, we explore different facets of cult life and human trafficking, from the psychological manipulation to the brave stories of those who have escaped.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melody. I'm Andrew's co-host. Having experienced the depth of a cult firsthand, specifically the House of Yahweh, I'm here as an advocate for fellow survivors. My journey has inspired me to help others who find themselves in similar situations. This podcast is committed to respecting our guests' privacy. To ensure their comfort and safety, we offer them the option to remain anonymous.
Additionally, we would like to include a disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Cultimatum or its affiliates. Cultimatum is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information shared by our hosts and guests. The content discussed on this podcast is based on personal experiences, opinions, and speculation, and should not be construed as professional services or advice. Neither the host nor the guest are assuming liability for any misuse or reliance on the information presented. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and listeners are encouraged to conduct their own research and seek professional advice where appropriate.
Before we dive into today's episode, we want to issue a trigger warning. Some episodes may explore explicit and potentially disturbing topics such as sexual abuse, rape, human trafficking, suicide, and other sensitive subjects. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Cultimatum Podcast, a culture of cults and human trafficking, and my name is Anonymous Andrew. And with me today is my co-host Melody, as she always is. Hello, Melody.
Hello, Andrew. We have a treat today, another cult that we have not covered. We have got, our guest is going to be anonymous, so she's going to go by the name Amy. That is not her real name, but we are protecting her privacy at her request. She was with a cult called the Divine Light Mission, and she's here to share her story with us. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Okay, where would you like to start?
Well, I could basically tell you my story of how I ended up in the Divine Light Mission and obviously the impact it had on my life.
Sure.
Guru Maharaji was the guru, the leader of the Divine Light Mission. She found out in about 1973 when I was 2 years old. Maharaji originally came to the West in 1971. So in 1973, she took me to the Palace of Peace in London, which was their kind of main centre in the UK at that time. While we were there, my mum did what we call service, which is basically voluntary work, and basically was learning the teachings of Maharaji. Basically, I was in a creche while we were there. Part of the cult is knowledge is the kind of ultimate practice that you can receive. So knowledge is like getting given the meditation technique. So my mum was down there wanting to receive knowledge. So basically part of it is once you've studied so much about Maharaji, you then ask at that time it was a Mahatma, you ask the Mahatma if you can have knowledge, which my mum did. And the Mahatma said no, because my mum was too committed to me and she was too attached to me. So basically she got refused knowledge. We came back to our hometown and my mum basically left me with an aunt and went back down again and received knowledge, obviously with me not being. So that was basically the kind of introduction to the cult. My mum then came back and I went to live in, at that time, it's a hippie area and the people in the cult are called premies. So my mum and I lived in various houses with the premies, and that was basically up until I was about 4. During that time, I went to Essen in Germany to see Maharaji for the first time. Basically it was like a bunker, I suppose. It was basically a massive bunker where during the war, the Germans would put their tanks and things like that, and there was like rows and rows of beds in it. Basically stayed in this, went to see Maharaji, but I had very little knowledge of that or the memories of that because I was only 3 years old. But I would have been through the first time a ritual called darshan. So darshan is basically where Maharaji would sit on his chair, throne, whatever you want to call it. And basically everybody would file past, and as they went past, they would speak, and it's basically looked upon as a very spiritual experience and a very privileged experience. So my first introduction to that would have been when I was 3, and I would have been placed at Mirage's feet. I went through about a year when my mum and dad got back together again and lived a semi kind of normal life. After that, my mum took me into the hub of the community when I was about 5. So that would be in the hub of the community. They had an ashram, and we also had a kind of spin-off house of the ashram. So I basically went to live in a community. Just at that time, it was all adults. Obviously, it had its rules and regulations. It was quite controlling, so there was no eating of meat. So you were all vegetarian. In every room of the house, there would be a big picture on the wall of Mirage. So obviously, as a child, you're 5 years old, and into that environment, basically the symbolism of having Mirage all over the walls is basically to make you feel that he's always looking at you, he's always watching you. Whether that I took it as a child, I was in a protective way, that Mirage was always looking after me, and he was always there keeping an eye on me. I lived in, that was a bit challenging, shall we say, because not everybody in the 70s were the most, all the hippies were the most stable. It moved about a lot, and ultimately I ended up living in the ashram, which was the main hub of the community. Throughout this time, I wasn't allowed to watch television, so we had no television either. So basically, growing up from the age of 5 till I was about 10, 11, my whole life was really just indoctrinated into the cult and all the different practices. And we had a practice called arti, so that's a kind of ritual that's part of what we call satsang, where everybody sits in a room and one person at a time sits and talks about Mirage and their journey. Or, to be honest, I can't really remember what they were talking about because I was just a wee girl. I just sat there and listened. And at the end of it, we would have a ritual called arti, where I would stand, and we would have an altar in the room, and I would stand in front of the altar with a wee tray and a candle and flowers on it, and we would sing a devotional song to the altar and the picture of Mirage while I kind of swung this tray about. And then I would go round everybody in the room, and they would, symbolically cleanse themselves with the heat coming off the candle. And there was a lot of other things. We had a lot of Mahatmas from India staying with us, and basically I kind of lived like that up until I was about 10, 11. Went abroad quite a few times, went to Rome, went to Malaga. During that time, I participated in Holi festivals. So we would basically go to Holi, and that's like an Indian festival. A lot of people celebrate it just now. So we would all go into like a big field, and Mirage would have a big stage with water guns on it, and he would basically spray everybody with the coloured water. Everybody would be all screaming and jumping up and down. And to be honest, I thought it was quite fun as a kid, because you just looked on it as it being a big water fight. But albeit it seems a bit odd, but it was quite good fun. What else? I'm trying to think of anything else important. Is there any questions you want to ask me about that?
I do have a question. I think you said at one point that your mom was told that she was too attached to you, and then she brought you somewhere else, or you were brought somewhere else at that time, so that your mom could receive the knowledge that the leader was offering. Where did you go, and for how long were you separated from your mother?
Yeah, well, my mum basically left me with her sister, and my sister ended up, my mum just disappeared. She didn't, it wasn't as if like there was a moment she was leaving me, she just disappeared. And her sister took me round to my aunt's, and my aunt watched me, and I don't know how long that was, but basically that was my mum. Obviously the cult had told my mum that she was too attached to me, so. And remember, my mum's very young at that time and very vulnerable. My mum must have been only about 19, 20, and she was very vulnerable. So the cult basically took control over her and told her that she was too attached to me. So basically what she chose to do was to detach from me, literally, so that she could go and get this wonderful knowledge that the cult had promised was going to solve all her problems and make all her life better. So I can understand why she done it. Obviously, I was very young. I was at the time, so I don't really have any memory of it. But I do know she left and just went away and left me with an aunt. I don't know how long I was there for, but I was looked after. My aunt was looked after me well. I think my dad actually might have came and got me at some point, but I don't really know. I don't really know the ins and outs and total.
I have another question. Do you know if that was something that was a common practice within the group to separate parents from their children if they felt that there was too strong a bond? Or was your mom like singled out in particular?
And I have I have the same kind of question. So in addition to Melody's question, what was it that they saw that they thought you were too attached? To me, that's a foreign concept. A mother and a child is one of the most strongest bonds in humanity. I don't understand why they would question that.
Because within the cult, the guru has got to be the main focus. So when I was brought up in the cult, the guru was supposed to be my main focus even as a child. You are basically, they look on it as he is the master and you are the devotee and you worship the master. So the master is looked on as the most important aspect of the whole cult. So that's why when I talk about darshan is you basically surrendering yourself to the master. So basically from the age of 3, I was getting taught you have to surrender. You're taught to surrender to the guru. That is how you basically achieve. I'm not sure what it was they were trying to achieve, because they had another topic they called riding on the holy name. So ride the holy name, and that's all about putting your faith and trust. It's a lot to do with faith.
I'm just going to interject. I think it has more to do with control. They hide it under the guise of faith, but I think obviously there's some jealousy there when a leader finds a bond between a mother and child as a threat to the point of wanting to separate them. That obviously right there is a red flag in the world of cults. And obviously I'm sure as an adult, you can see that now. And I'm sure that was very difficult and traumatic for both you and your mother during that time.
I'm just telling you as it happened. And it's now that I'm actually understanding what happened to me, because I've only started looking into this like the last year and a half. So it's only now as an adult I'm trying to get my head around what happened to me as a child.
And again, I'm the outsider because I've never been in a cult. But from learning through this podcast and the people we've interviewed, the cults would want, like Melody was introduced to her cult through her parents. And you would think that they would want the parents and the children there because that's more members. And the bond between the parent and the child, as a cult leader, I would say keep that intact. To me, it just sounds irrational, like it's anti-cult behavior. But I can understand Melody's point of view too. It just sounds counterproductive almost. If I wanted as many people to come to my cult and I'm separating family, I mean, we're not talking about separating families like.
Well, it was only temporary, Andrew. She came back. I mean, her mother came back and got her and brought her back into the cult. So it wasn't a permanent separation.
Okay.
Is that correct, Amy?
It just seems strange to me.
Do you know if it did happen to other people?
That's what happens. I don't know. In my community, there wasn't a lot of children. So in my community, there was another 2. Now, whether or not their parent was asked to put Miraji first, but she most certainly did put Miraji first. Basically, when I was brought up, in the houses I was brought up in, Miraji was the main focus of everybody in the house. So basically, I was just a child in that house. I mean, there was no focus on us as children. Eventually, another 2 girls moved in and there was 3 of us. I mean, we basically looked after each other. Everybody in that house was focused on Miraji. They went to satsang every night. They ate together, everything. One time I sat down to dinner and we got told we weren't allowed to talk unless it was about Miraji. He was the main focus. They're consumed with Miraji. That's all they spoke about. And that's all their focus was about. Everything they did was about the cult and the cult leader and everything about it.
The playbook or the MO of the cult leaders, they do want to be the center of attention for sure. It's not often we hear of cult leaders purposely separating parents and children, but it's not unheard of either. So I was just curious.
And that's where my...
Well, that was why with that Mahatma that was in the Palace of Peace at that time. Now, whether or not that's that Mahatma's way of thinking, I don't know what the Mahatma's name was, but obviously that was his way of thinking. So whether or not that's a representation of the whole organisation, I'm not sure. But that's what happened. And the reason I know is because my mum told me. Because when I later went to get knowledge, my mum was like, well, you might not get it. And she told me that she got refused the first time. Because a lot of people take it really badly when they're refused knowledge. It's very much drummed up to be this sacred, special part of your life, and your life's going to change. So when something is made so attractive and so fabulous and out of this world, to be refused, it has a really bad impact on some people. So it would have had an impact on my mum. And albeit, remember, she is only 19, she was very young and very naive.
Yeah.
Why they wanted to separate from my mum, I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay. To me, like Melody was saying, there's a playbook that we think cult leaders go by, and this one just seems to be not in that playbook. So, but I'm sorry. So continue with your story.
Well, I was going to tell you about the name changes, if I could go through the name changes. So 1971, he came to the West and he was the Divine Light Mission. Then what happened was he came to the West as a young Indian boy. He was only about 12, 13, and brought all his family. And his family were treated like the Holy Family. But then him and his family fell out because he married a white American and moved to America, and his family were not happy. So what he did was he changed everything and turned it into the Elan Vital, which was a kind of more modern version. Then in 2001, he turned it into TPRF. And a lot of this is down to making charitable status, because it's all about making money. So the charitable status, I think, it's got some sort of tax purposes behind it. Then in 2008, he changed it towards peace. And then in 2012, he changed it to the Peace Education Programme, which is now masquerading now, which he's now taking into prisons, and he's now taking into schools and selling it as a self-help type of programme. And it's aimed at 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds and upwards. So children are now getting exposed to this cult. And when all the introductions are done to the cult, you will not see Miraj's face. He keeps very much in the background. And there is actually an interview out there of him talking about that.
And
he doesn't.
I assume, Amy, you're talking about public schools. They're bringing this into public schools.
She asked, "Is this in a public school?"
This is in state schools in the UK and America. It's all over the world. He's in schools, basic schools. Yes, it's very scary, very scary. And he went into a prison in England in June. He went into Leeds prison to speak to prisoners and published a video showing him doing it. That is very scary. And what's even more frightening, in the UK, to go into prisons and to go into schools, you need backing from politicians. Politicians don't just let anybody in. So from my perspective, there's politicians backing Guru Maharaji, and I think that is quite frightening, very frightening, because obviously you're very, obviously. I mean, I would like to talk about going into the real world as well, because that was where my major issues came, if that's okay. So when I was 10, going on 11, that was when the Divine Light Mission came about, and Maharaji decided he was going to close all the ashrams, because obviously the ashrams, it's all the Indian culture. He wanted to get away from the Indian culture and try and make it more modern, because throughout the cult, Maharaji's always targeted money and people in power and people in positions. If you look at him online, he's in all the parliaments and governments and councils all over the world, basically. He knows exactly what he's doing. He targets the right people. So when the ashram shut down, one of the premies offered my mum somewhere for us to stay. So my mum and I basically went into a house, but the people that lived in the house weren't all premies. They were just ordinary people, which I stayed in for a few years. And basically I was exposed at that time to situations that no child should ever see or experience. And basically that was all down to my vulnerability. When I left the cult, I was very vulnerable because I didn't have very little contact or very little bond or relationship with my extended family. My family was basically the premies and the cult. So when I left, I lost all them, and I didn't have any support mechanisms there. So basically from the time I left the cult, I was very, very vulnerable. And basically I was so vulnerable that for the majority of my adult life, I was basically a target for
and I'm sorry, Amy, just to clarify again, how old were you when you left? If you said it, I might have missed it.
That's from about the age of 10, 11. And
she asked you, how old were you when you left?
Did you leave with your mother?
10. Well, it would be 10 going on 11.
Did you leave with your mother?
Yes, my mum and I. So my mum and I went in to live with one of the premies. He had a big house and they rent rooms out in it. So there was quite a few people staying, so we went in to stay in that house. Basically, I lived there for quite a few years, and as I say, I was exposed to things that a girl of that age should never have been exposed to, basically down to my vulnerability. And these were people who had very good jobs and were probably quite well thought of in society. So moved from that, and then eventually my mum miraculously got offered a fabulous house when I turned 14, a very good house through, I don't know, housing association or whatever you want to call it. Don't know what you call it in America. Miraculously, that got offered to her when I was 14. I don't know why they couldn't have done that for her when I was 10, 11. I don't know why they had to wait till I was 14 before they gave my mum a house, but they did. Basically, we moved into that house, and we didn't move in for sure we have a house, so we were delayed a year. Did have quite a nice wee time for a wee bit, and then after that, basically, and I'm not make myself out to be a victim here. Obviously, I've got to take responsibility for my actions, which I'm quite happy to do. But going into the world, you weren't really equipped emotionally, mentally. There was a whole group of people out there that I didn't understand how they thought. Brought up in the cult to be open-minded, to accept everybody as an individual, not to judge people, all these different healthy attitudes. And then you go out into the world and realise, well, the world's not like that. So you leave yourself wide open. So I ended up in a very violent relationship, a very abusive relationship, which was really difficult. I ended up having a child. And then when I finally managed to leave the relationship, I just went from bad to worse. Again, I was just a target I was just a walking target because I was so vulnerable. But obviously I didn't realise that at the time. I couldn't understand why that would happen. Plus I was also making very bad life choices. Because I felt, because I was vulnerable, I tended to jump from one relationship to another because that was my way of surviving, because literally I had nobody. I had my mum, but I didn't have a good relationship with my mum.
I'm not obviously justifying it or saying it's right, but I would hope that might give you a little bit of comfort to know that I think that it is quite common when you're in a cult and you don't learn what healthy boundaries are to end up in relationships that don't have healthy boundaries. Good.
Well, I read the book Escaping Utopia, and I found that very, very helpful. I thought that was a really good, because as I say, I've only started analysing my childhood about a year and a half ago, because before that I was really just in survival mode. I feel as though I've been in survival mode for the most of my adult life. I've never really took a step back and kind of looked at things and went, right, okay, that wasn't right, maybe that. I just basically walked about, and I was always made out it was my fault and I was the bad person, I've always been the one that was basically got told, you were the bad person, you do crazy things, you're this and you're that. And I kind of accepted that that's the way it was, and then I went, hold on a wee second, there's a more to this than what I'm kind of thinking. So when I analysed it, I thought, right, okay, if you had went through what I've went through, I'm sure you would be a wee bit messed up, But anyway, that kind of snowballed until I was it really got very, very difficult. There's some stuff I can't even talk about just now because it could cause a lot of trouble, and I don't want to cause any trouble. But effectively, until
Oh, gosh.
1996, I basically tried to take my own
Well, I'm
life. At that
sorry to
point, I
hear
was
that.
24.
And that also is
Ended up in
not
hospital,
uncommon.
get my stomach pumped, etc. And
She said
after
that
that,
that's not
to go back to
uncommon.
cult. Yeah, I know. I did actually first feel suicidal when I was 16. That's when it started. But I basically tried to take my own life when I was 24, and then decided after that to go back to the cult, because obviously the cult was my safe space. That's where I thought I belonged, because when I came out into the real world and got to know people, I thought I don't really belong here. So I went back to the cult because I thought that was my safe space. But I went back, but really the cult was what really caused all the problems in the first place, and I had rebelled against it. So to go back to something, it just messed my head up even more.
Well, sometimes we do need to
That
go
was
back to
difficult.
something to just be reassured that it isn't the right answer or the right place for us. So that isn't uncommon either. Sometimes as humans, we do that to learn lessons in life and just to reassure ourselves. And it sounds like you did eventually, feel or learn that lesson loud and clear that wasn't a good, healthy place for you.
So I went back, but I didn't really get much from it, to be honest. And basically, I was just, again, in survival mode. In my real life, I was basically just trying my best to survive and making decisions I thought were right at the time. Thankfully, they weren't destructive decisions. Maybe the decisions I was making weren't how I wanted to live my life, making me totally happy. But I was trying to create as normal and as stable a life for my child, as I felt as though I had, put them through quite a lot, as I had basically wasn't in the right place after dealing with. Again, I do take some responsibility.
And it does affect people's lives and their ability to make decisions down the road after they leave 100%.
So I went back for about 12 years, and then my child got older, and my mum kind of interfered or said in a relationship they were having and mentioned the cult in Miraji, which I had told my mum she was never to do. And it caused a lot of problems. And I basically challenged my mum on it, basically saying, I told you've not to discuss it. Like, we tried to make it that was my mum's business and don't bring it into my child's life. And basically my mum turned around and told me Miraji was the most important person in her life. I had known, but obviously I knew when I was brought up that Miraji was the most important person in her life. But for them to actually turn around and say it to you, was very, very hurtful. And that's when I went, I'm not going back. The leader of the cult or whatever is to be more important and more of a priority than your child. I never went back. And then I went into yet another just not very healthy relationship, which lasted quite a number of years. And when I came out of that, that's when I went, right, okay, you need to take a step back here because I'm in my 50s. You need to take a step back here and have a look and just look at why are you making these really bad decisions. You really need to have a look at things. And then I get triggered and I had some memories that were really, really disturbing about my childhood and it was quite disturbing, which basically I've been in therapy and been working with a therapist on that. So that's when I decided that I really need to try and speak to people. There must be other people out there who've had similar experiences to me. It can't just be me. And I went online and I came across who is Miraji's daughter-in-law. She's actually married to Hans, who's Miraji's eldest son. And we came in contact with each other, and she told me to read the book Escaping Utopia. And that was like a total eureka moment. That just put everything into place for me. Because I had basically went through life thinking that I knew there was something different from me, from everybody else, but I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe somebody said I might have autism. I thought if I get ADHD. I mean, obviously there is issues there. I probably get attachment issues and all the rest of it. But I always knew there was something no right. And when I went into Escaping Utopia, that's when I realised I'm just programmed different from everybody else. And especially since I was in the cult from the age of 2, like I've been in Miraji's feet to the age of 3 up until I was like 10. That's definitely got to have an impact on a child when their brain's developing. you're getting taught to surrender from a very, very young age. I mean, surely that can't be healthy.
When I started hearing these stories, I had no idea that growing up in America, for me, we heard about cults. As a matter of fact, we're recording this 2 days before International Cult Awareness Day, and all I knew about cults was the big ones that you heard on the news. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses, everybody knows is a cult. But when I met Melody and doing my other podcasts, I stumbled upon cults and started hearing these stories. I was flabbergasted. And I said to myself, is America, or maybe globally, is anybody aware of what's going on behind these closed compounds, these churches, these religions, what they're doing to the, not just adults, but the children is just blew my mind. So I need to, first of all, thank you for the courage to step forward and tell your story. Mm-hmm. But this is precisely why we're doing this, is somebody needs to take, again, I'm going to get on the law enforcement rant. And I know this happened in another country, but this is going on everywhere. And I don't know how it's going to get stopped, but I'm very, very sorry for hearing what you have gone through and what you're still going through. So I just needed to get that out.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
You understand why I am so distressed at the thought that you've taken these programs into schools. There was a lady, a pastor on Sky News, and it triggered me. I was absolutely devastated. And she basically works with knife crime. There's a lot of knife crime in the UK. And she basically brought Miraji to London to go and meet young girls and boys, teenagers who are in gangs, who are involved in knife crime, with their families to talk about peace. I'm watching that, thinking, I kissed that man's feet, and remembering and I've actually put pictures up. There's pictures on the internet of him with the children kissing his feet. So it's not something, that we're just making up. You can go in and you can see it for yourself. It was encouraged. The adults thought it was brilliant. You were kissing this man's feet, which is just ridiculous. And also get into the prisons. What's the purpose of getting into prisons? Again, very, very vulnerable people. But, I mean, I would crack a joke. I went, is he trying to create a global mafia? Why are you targeting prisons? Why are you targeting vulnerable people? Vulnerable people that are very susceptible, and it's just totally wrong. I mean, the whole thing is just totally wrong. And as I say, must be political backing there in the UK. I don't know how things work in America, but he's definitely in lots of schools in the States. There's lots of videos online of him and of the young people in schools in the States watching videos of him and talking about him. I mean, it's just wrong. The whole thing is wrong, and it really, really upsets me. I get quite upset over it. I'm getting a bit better now, but it's very upsetting. I don't want to see anybody go through. There's lots of people like me out there. When I got introduced to she then introduced me to some other girls who I've been speaking to. They're all over Europe and America, and we keep in contact. And they have similar stories to me. I was a lot younger, so I think there's a lot that I've blacked out. I think there's a lot more, but at the moment I'm just dealing with what I can remember, and that's enough for me just now. But there's a lot more, and it's all very organised, and it's all very structured, and it's all networked across the world. And to me, that's quite scary. Oh yes, but we're going very, very mainstream. If you look up the Peace Education Programme, that's how he's masquerading just now. And that's all about, these kind of self-help kind of things, and peace is possible, and it's all about peace, and he's writing books, and, and even if you put stuff online, there's so many people who'll defend him because he's done so much to help people. It might do a lot to help people, but at the same time, there's so many other people that's lives get destroyed through it. There's a lot of premies who have left. When you talk to ones that weren't kids in it, ones that were actually went as adults, a lot of them lost their life savings. They lost their inheritance because he encourages you to leave money. My mum will leave money to Miraji in her will. I know that for a fact. I know she gives him money every month. So people give him money. He makes a lot of money. He's got a very, very good lifestyle, and so is all his family. She is married to Hans, who's the oldest son. Hans has now left the family. He doesn't have anything to do with it. There is there's a website called Resources for the Truth About femrawat.com, and in there you can read Hans' story, and he talks about what he went through. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me discussing it, but basically he was abused. He says that he was abused by his father. I don't want to say any more because it's not my story to tell, but I would encourage anybody to go and read Hans' story. And that is somebody who knows Meraji firsthand. So this man should not be allowed to get into schools. He should not be targeting vulnerable prisoners.
That's completely understandable. And ironically enough, Amy, my cult has done something very similar. They started a group where they teach something they call peaceful solutions, which sounds very similar to what your group is doing. And I think they try to get into prisons and schools and all these things too. But I think they have a twofold reason for doing this. I also think it's a way for them to launder some of their money. That's just my theory. I don't know that, but that is a suspicion that I have about their reason for having this as part of their group. And I wouldn't be surprised if my leader stole this from your cult's playbook, because they tend to share playbooks and he tends to take things from other religions quite frequently.
When Hans talks about his father and talks about how they operated and how they operate now, and they basically operate like a mafia organisation. That's what it's like. I mean, years ago, you can look online, it was about 1973, 74, journalists in America put a cream pie in Meraji's face for whatever reasons he did, but it was only a cream pie. Meraji actually sent people to basically kill him. The man didn't die, but he got very bad injuries to his head.
Wow.
And the people that done it were then sent back to get them out of the way so that they wouldn't get charged.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, though, that journalist committed suicide not that long ago, but they do operate like the mafia. That's what they're like. And it's all about power and it's all about control and it's all about money. But sadly, the people that are enthralled in it, becomes one of them, that's not how they see it. They see it as they're the enlightened ones. They know best. They know better than us. We're the ones that don't understand, and Meraji saves them, and Meraji's always the one that looks after them and person in their life, and that's just how they are, you know. If you spoke to anybody that's in it, you'd be surprised about how brainwashed they are. I mean, my mum's been in it since 1972, 73, and she's a stupid woman. But there's lots of people, and a majority of them are all very highly educated, they've all got money. So he uses these people for the power, you know, and he has got politicians. There are politicians in his organisation. I also found out as well that they got lottery funding out the UK big lottery to do some of their programmes, which is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, using it to fund their programmes going into the prisons and the schools, which that again was my mind. Actually, as well, there's a website. It's like Wikipedia, but it's for children. It's called Kiddle, and if you put Meraji's name in that, he comes up and is actually explaining who and what Meraji is, which actually makes me want to physically throw up. I don't even know why. The only reason I would think that they would want to do that is if a child comes home to their mum and says, I was at school today and the peace education program's coming in, and it's Prem Rawat. Sorry, I keep calling him Meraji.
Yeah. That is very disturbing. And let me just clarify, does he changed his name now? How many different names has he gone by? Do you know?
Yeah, I took a wee note of them so I wouldn't forget. So originally he was Guru Meraji when he came to the West, and when I was in it as a child, he was Guru Meraji. When I went back, he changed his name to Meraji, dropped the Guru. Now, then he changed, when he was Guru Meraji, he was Lord of the Universe.
Do you have any idea why he keeps changing his name?
It's quite interesting. And he was also referred to as the Perfect Master. And he was also referred to as the Satguru. Well, I would imagine it's because he's trying to fit into society. He seems to change as society changes. So if you remember in the 70s, you had the Beatles and all that going and getting these gurus. It was quite, I suppose at that time it was quite cool to have a guru, wasn't it? There was quite a lot of gurus. And then obviously when he changed self-help stuff, now he'll be like Prem Rawat. He'll not want, you know, he's trying to, I mean, he does it in a suit and everything now, and everything's all, I don't think he has holy anymore, and I don't know if there's any they have an event in Australia, because they own a big bit of land in Australia, and they have a closed event for people that have been in the cult for a while. Probably there he might do darshan. I'm not actually sure.
Right. The pain that I'm feeling coming off of you is palpitating. So I can't imagine what you have gone through. How are you dealing with this today?
Well, basically, I'm just finished my last therapy session. So I've had therapy 3 times throughout my life. I had a very good therapist who was very, very good. He's really, really helped me. So the last basically been on a kind of journey of self-discovery, without making that a cliche, and trying to analyse the cult, its impacts on me and why I behave and make decisions that I have. And he's helped me understand that, and it's been really, really useful. Obviously, speaking to fans and the other people that I got in touch with has been quite good, because we've been able to swap stories. At the moment, I've kind of taken a step back and just trying to live a normal life. Like, I go to work, but basically I just live from day to day. I have to get up and do yoga every day. So I get up every morning before I go to work and I do yoga, and that helps me. I am very focused on keeping myself nice and calm though. I try not to have any drama in my life. I try to keep my life as calm as possible. And basically just try and, I mean, I do think about it every day and what maybe different things, but basically I just focus on trying to have a nice life, surround myself by good people.
Good.
Only want to surround myself with people that I feel care about me, and I'm quite fortunate.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I hope, Amy, that coming here on the show here and sharing your story has also been part of your healing journey. Because it does sound like this is something that you feel very strongly that you need to share. And for a lot of us, that does become part of our healing journey. And so I hope that this has helped you a little bit today, too.
And I think we met you, Melody would know better, met through one of our Facebook groups.
Actually,
are you part of that community?
No, it was a different platform. Well,
Melody's saying it was a different platform.
But I will recommend, if you do have Facebook, that there is. I'm the founder and creator of a Facebook group called Cult Escape and Recovery, where you can also find other people that have similar experiences and stories, and that might help you as well to post in there and listen to other people's stories, read their experiences. Wonderful.
Good.
And the Cultimatum podcast page as well, of course.
Yeah, we have our own group, the Cultimatum Podcast. So I'm happy to hear that you completed your therapy and sounds like you're doing everything you need to do to get up every morning and push through this. All right. Anything, Melody, before we say goodbye?
Just thank you, Amy, for coming on the show and being brave enough to share your story. And again, I do hope that this has helped with you along the way of your healing journey, and continue to share your story. If that is part of what you need to do to heal, continue sharing. And sometimes our stories can help others.
Yeah. Telling our story does help. So, all right, Amy, again, thank you. And everybody,
thank you.
Do not join a cult. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Once again, we want to thank Amy so much for coming on the show and sharing her story with us. The audience doesn't realize this, but this was actually our second recording with Amy. The first one was, we had so many technical issues that we couldn't even air it. Andrew couldn't even piece it together. As good as he is, he couldn't make a miracle happen with that one. And this one certainly has some glitches and some issues technical wise. There were a lot of spots where she couldn't hear me and I couldn't hear her, and Andrew was translating for us. I think she's in a rural area in Scotland where she is, and I'm in a rural area here, so we might both have internet connections that aren't the greatest, and it did cause some issues, but I think we definitely at least got the bulk of her message came across in the interview and this one.
So. While I was editing it, there were so many places where she couldn't hear either of us. So I don't know if it was her internet or the audience. I don't want to give away her location, but it isn't.
Oh.
She was in the UK, in Europe. Let's just say that much. And her internet connection might not have been good, or it was just on a delay, and you may or may not hear it, but there were sections where Melody and I both would jump in with a question or follow up, and she didn't hear that, so we just talked over each other. So we apologize for that, but there was nothing I could do with that. I spent portion of my day trying to patch that together.
Without the exception of maybe re-recording again, but I just don't know. I think some of those technical issues are based on our internet capabilities and locations that we can't do a whole lot about. So I think we would end up with similar issues.
Yeah, it would only be just, the same thing. So no, I just want to thank Amy. And I do say this in the episode. I don't know if I took it in or left it out, but I genuinely felt her pain. She is still, we asked her something about how she's doing today, and I remember her saying, I still think about it every day. And she's in her 50s. This was when she was growing up. So my heart goes out to her. It was a very traumatic experience for her, and this is why we're doing this. This is there was a section I had to take out, but I do say to her, I said, Amy, this is why we started the podcast, is to let people like you vent and get it out and tell your story. And I'm glad we were able to let her tell her story.
Absolutely. And I know that she started her healing pretty late in life, because she says in the interview that when she left, I think a second or third abusive relationship, that she was in her 50s, and she finally took the time to step back and said, why am I making such bad choices? And really started looking at her past and her childhood and the damage that was done to her inside the cult with these rituals and the control and all of the stuff that she faced during that time. So I think that, she was at a point where she really wants this episode out there. She wants, and I think the thing too is that you could tell it really, really bothered her that they're taking this, trying to make it sound like it's some kind of peace mission that they're bringing into prisons and schools.
Right.
And she's very, very passionate about, I think, wanting to make people aware that that's out there, and that it's under a guise that doesn't look culty from the outside, but really they're trying to recruit people into the group and the cult. And she wants people to be aware of that. And actually, some of those websites are in the show notes. So feel free to go and take a look at some of that information that she shared with us, that we're sharing with you as the audience. So if you'd like more information on some of that is available on there. So once again, thank you so much to Amy for being so brave and coming on and sharing her story and her vulnerabilities with us. And of course, as always, we want to thank all of you for tuning into Cultimatum. Your support is always appreciated. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we would like you to please take a moment to rate and review us on platforms such as Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep listening to all of our latest episodes.
And I'm just going to add, we really need reviews, folks. We only have a couple, and those reviews help the podcast grow and get noticed on, especially if you're on Apple or Spotify.
Yes.
You can also connect with us by joining our Facebook group, Cultimatum Podcast, where we dive deeper into these important topics.
And you can also find us on additional social media platforms such as Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads.
If you have a personal experience with cults or human trafficking that you'd like to share, reach out to us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
And if you're an ex-cult member needing any additional support, you can consider joining the Cult Escape and Recovery group on Facebook.
And you can check out my other podcast, which has been rebranded. I have renamed my podcast, The Anonymous Andrew Modern Dating Podcast. And you can find that on Apple and Spotify and everywhere you find Cultimatum. And if you'd like to help us with the cost of maintaining the podcast, please, we ask that there's a link in the show notes called Buy Us a Cup of Coffee. And it's simply a link, like you click on it and you can donate $5 or $10 to the show. Every little bit helps in our mission to spread awareness about these cults and human trafficking.
Yep, and that's going to be right above the summary. So it's almost the first thing that comes up when you look in the show notes. So it's hard to miss.
Can't miss it.
Yes, exactly. And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you're not alone.